Outside.
Okay, we're live, guys. They can hear you.
Hi, people who can hear
Hello, and
us.
welcome to Breaking into Hollywood, the Master Course Live. We've got a lively pair with us tonight, Gary and Doug, talking about sports. So it might turn into a sports cast sooner or later. Every week, if you've been with us before, every Tuesday night we have a special guest joining us. Doug is an extra special guest, writer, producer, whole slew of credits to his name, and a first in Hollywood, which Gary will be talking to you more about. These shows are about you and for you. So if you have any questions for Doug or Gary on anything they're talking about, or if you want them to go a bit deeper into something they're talking about, just type your questions into the comments right under this broadcasting box. We want to be able to give you as much information that's going to help you on your journey of breaking into Hollywood. So with that, I'm going to remind you guys of something, do some housekeeping before I hand over to Gary. Tomorrow night is our first private hangouts for those taking the master course. So if you're actually taking the course and you're in our first group, we'll be seeing you here live again tomorrow night at 5. And with the housekeeping done, I'm going to hand over to Mr. Gary Goldstein, if my mouse can find you on my computer. Hi.
Where am I? Am I here?
You're here.
Because sometimes I am and sometimes I'm not. Welcome. Thank you, Bethan. That was fabulous. And welcome, Doug. And here we are for another. Now, this is great because we just got, let's see, what does this say? The comments are flowing in. Doug Richardson writes, action features with character arc, a rare talent.
Ooh.
And yeah, we're going to have to aggregate these for you, Doug, soon. But in the meantime, so we are excited to have you on board here tonight, Doug. And I'm going to give the short, I can't even find your bio, but all
good. It could even be shorter.
No, this will be the shortest in the history of Google Hangouts. But Doug, who is a local denizen, he lives here in Los Angeles, grew up in Northern California. Actually, the greatest thing, before we get to his movies, I read a line in I think it was, Doug's written a couple of great books, which we're going to talk about in a minute, but one of them, which is, I forget which book this was from, doesn't matter, Doug Richardson. The son of a career politician, Doug grew up outside Sacramento and inside the state capitol. He used to talk his way into then-Governor Ronald Reagan's office just to get a handful of jelly beans.
Yes, now
so
he's dating me.
So he learned how to out-negotiate the great negotiator.
There wasn't much negotiating with that. He was just really nice and used to give the... You know, I think if he knew the hijinks that I got up to inside the state capitol with some of my buddies, maybe he wouldn't have been so, generous with the jelly beans.
No doubt, but everyone says he was the nicest guy.
Yes, that was before all the security and stuff like that. We would never been able to get away with that kind of stuff we did back then.
Yeah, that was back in the olden days, pre everything. But so for those of you who, a lot of you apparently are very, very big fans of Fluent with Doug and his background, his accomplishments, which are plentiful. For those of you who are not, Doug, amongst other things, and we can fill in the dots as we go, but as a professional screenwriter here in Hollywood, he's really sort of elevated the action genre. He's got Bad Boys. Well, his first, I guess your first produced big action film was Die Harder, Die Hard 2.
Yes, Die Harder, the title no one really gets.
Yeah, Die Harder. How can you
Someone
die?
actually wrote me a note the other day, actually. Is the title Die Hard 2 or is it Die Harder? And I frankly didn't know.
Yeah.
And I never really thought about it,
Right. It's sort of
Die Harder, but that would have been such a bad title.
Yeah, it's sort of both. But if it's Die Harder, then you've got to explain what that means and how do you actually die harder.
Right.
Which is confounding. In any event, so Die Hard 2, Bad Boys, and I'm probably getting these out of order, Doug, you'll forgive me, The Money Train, which was, I mean, these all have phenomenal casts. Great actor Joe Rubin actually directed The Money Train.
Joe Rubin directed Money Train. Or like I like to call it, White Men Can't Ride the Subway. That's at least what it kind of turned into.
That was the subtitle in very small print on the one sheet.
It was.
Okay. And then you wrote the story for, and you executive produced Mooseport. What's the full title?
Welcome to Mooseport.
Well, that's what I thought. Welcome to Mooseport. The
movie that killed Gene Hackman's career. That's the last movie of the great actors. Yeah.
What is that really the most recent film he did?
That's the last movie. And I actually was reading something the other day about Mr. Hackman, and it said, retired from acting, retired from Hollywood. His last movie was Welcome to Mooseport, and it was just kind of sad. It's just, here's this great actor who's done so many great roles in so many iconic movies, and his last role was this, bomb, a cute bomb that I'm very proud of, that I adore. It's a sweet little movie. But
well, we've all had those, and ironically, what's interesting is in many cases they turn out to be later on more popular than they were when they came out in theaters. You never know.
Well, it wouldn't have taken much to make that movie more popular than it was in theaters. I think.
Okay.
I don't think anybody saw it in theaters other than my parents, and it was the first movie I think my dad ever saw of mine where he felt, like he was proud of it. It wasn't rated R. Let me put it that way.
And so that led to another Bruce Willis film, right? I mean, I assume that Hostage, which I quite like, was the result of your relationship you developed with Bruce.
It was one of the. There was a lot of things I've done with Bruce, a lot of uncredited stuff, but that was the last thing that we did. Well, no, that's the last produced thing we did. I also did a version of that, led to a version of Die Hard 4 that was not fruitful, but yeah, I did a lot of work with that guy.
So the other thing that I want to mention before we dive in is that Doug, you and I were on, I guess it was about a week ago, I have no sense of time, but recently you and I were on the phone, and I don't know, well, actually I know how long we were on the phone approximately, as long as it took you to drive from
to Tarzana to Oxnard. That's right.
So I traveled with you, so to speak, and during that call we traversed a lot of terrain, and one of the things that really impressed me about Doug, for those of you listening, is just and it's not that common, his extraordinary fluency with where the market is and where it's going, paying attention to trends, and how content's being created, and what does it mean to be a screenwriter with sort of obviously birthed through the traditional birth canal of, I don't even know, it's like, I don't know.
Very traditional birth canal.
Yeah, but you cheated. I did a traditional, but I went through like Indie World, low to no budget, a bunch of really bad, or low budget films before I ascended, if you will, to the studio. And you just,
I think that's kind of more of a traditional way. I just kind of got in through the back door somehow, and
yeah,
someone gave me a job.
Someone hired you.
Someone hired me and said, "Hey, come work for us."
Well, if you can do it, it's a beautiful thing. So anyway, just my point being that Doug is really, really thoughtful. It was a great conversation. I wish we'd recorded it.
Sounds like most people when they were on LSD. I wish I would have recorded that. We said some really smart things.
We did. So let's try and set that table just a little bit and revisit some of that conversation. I thought it was really interesting when we sort of jumped off that ledge of the changes that have occurred inside the beltway of Hollywood proper, right, if you will.
Yeah.
And how life has changed for the entirety of the creative process and community, really, in terms of how films are developed, how they're, how many are developed and made, how the decisions get made, how they get packaged. All of these things have, and so what does that look like through the lens of a Doug Richardson if you were to sort of sit back and say, this is where we've been, this is where we are, this may be where we're going.
Well, it's kind of strange and overwhelming if you actually look at where it's been and where it might go. And our conversation was primarily about where it might go or where it's going, because there's a whole lot of different forks in the road. At the same time, we were talking about primarily the changing platforms and formatting of content, which I find really interesting and super exciting. I don't know if the content necessarily is changing.
Right.
I think people are still compelled to watch good stories with great characters that go to great places. Whether it's escapism or some other form of entertainment. I don't think those things are going anywhere. I think just where and how we see them is what's really changing, and changing is the biggest word, because it is evolving right before our eyes. The world I was birthed into in film had kind of been around for a while, and it was a system, and if you got it and it worked for you, great. Now it's not a system. It is a landscape of opportunities and disappointments, but still a lot of opportunities out there, and so that's what's exciting. At the same time, I don't have any insight into any new content that they're going to be interested in. It's just the places you're going to be able to watch, the content and how you're going to watch it.
Well, yeah. I think that listen, we have a mix of people in this community, and for example, some are more film-centric or oriented, and some are more television-oriented. And I've often made the comment, Doug, that had any of us known where television might eventually go creatively, that it could sustain as a business matter, being, when we have, all these new platforms, which are really why this is happening, competing, bringing in all these amazing talents, and there's no longer the snobbery, the Berlin Wall that separated film and TV, which existed many years ago. Now you've got, everybody from the film side wanting to tell stories with really textured characters that unfold over multiple years, multiple seasons, storylines that are just brilliantly fascinating. But I forget where I was going with that. I think one of the things that's interesting, when you and I started, there were fixed menus. It was a system, and TV would announce the new fall season, and there were so many new records coming out this month, and there were so many movies coming out from the major studios this month, and you had sort of a menu, a fixed menu. We all shared the same menu.
And there was a way you made a movie, and there was a way you made a TV show. There was TV pitching season, and which is still kind of exists now for the networks. There's the whole season, and how writers get, shows get put on the air with pilots, and then eventually those pilots, might turn into shows, and then features. That was just sort of a year-round thing, but it was much simpler to pick a feature then. They would make a movie because they liked it. They liked it, they were interested in it, they thought they knew how to market it, they thought there'd be a place for it, but generally they let their gut, the studio would let their gut say, wow, this is a movie I'd like to see, and this is how much money I would commit to it, and go make the movie for that much money, and when it's done, show it to us, and we'll take it over to the marketing guys, and our ace marketing guys would then figure out how to go sell the film. And sometimes they were shocked and surprised and wouldn't have a clue, but they'd have to figure out how to sell the thing. Now it's gone for, then there was the recent change to, it's how, it's they don't want to sell anything they can't market. If they love it, it scares them because they can't quantify it, so they want to know how to market it. And if it doesn't fit that thing that they've done before, they don't want to do it. And they do that really well now, at least with you know, if it's got Marvel attached to it or something else. And then there's the next step, which is crazy, which is the newest one, which is we have this weekend in 2017, and on this weekend, we think we can hold it because we want to deliver this kind of franchise on this date, and it's going to be based on this YA book. That's going to, you know, and we need to make the movie to fit that date. So none of the calculus involved in is it any good and do we like it, you know, is there,
but,
you know,
but
when they're choosing to make it. It's completely flipped.
It's completely flipped, and yet I'm gonna posit something and see if you agree with this, which is, you know, that was then, and even though that system was exactly as you described, the people on the other side of the desk, if you will, were our contemporaries. They came from the same place we came from. They were actually from and of the film business.
Yes.
And so they were as excited about a green light. There weren't 35 executives on the creative side of a major studio. There were 5. Right. And you know, very accessible. Budgets were less than opening weekend marketing budgets today. And there was no such thing back in the day as a $20 million star. So there was a lot of diversity of storytelling. Mm-hmm. Interestingly, zoom forward to today. I think we're getting back to that because there was a period of years. We've just come out the other side, I believe. I truly believe that we have. And it's aided by technology. It's aided by the explosion of platform opportunities, which is when there was that contraction and all the independent, those 30 companies or whatever it was, that number of companies like Miramax and New Line and Vestron and Hemdale and they all went away.
Right.
Some went bankrupt, some were acquired for their library value and dismantled. And so there was a period of contraction before technology, before Netflix, before Amazon had a theatrical component, before there was a Hulu, before on it, you know, there was Redbox, before so many things. DVDs had been depressed. There was no real option on the horizon. Now we do have, on both the feature side, and we have things like Tug.com, and we have other alternative viable distribution options, but we also have now Orange is the New Black from Netflix, and we have all these players that did not exist before who actually are sort of, in a sense, would you agree, they're free of the heavy robes of history and habit.
Oh, so much so now. Some of them don't even want you to bring a producer to the show. You know, they just, you know, or a studio to produce the movie or television show for their distribution channel. They just want you to show up with it. They're gonna produce it themselves, and you know, that also, you know, makes them cheaper to produce. And it's extraordinarily exciting, and I do agree with you. I do think we're in a certain way coming out on the other side because there's so many different platforms, and there's so much competition to figure out how we're going to get movies on these platforms, and how we're going to keep eyeballs on these platforms. You know, I mean, someone said the other day, there's that old, I don't know, was it a rock and roll song or was it a quote from someone that said, you know, the revolution will not be televised. Right. Now it's the revolution will not be streamed. You know, it's and that's kind of it's all going to be out there, and I'm right now trying to sell a couple of TV shows, and it's amazing. We have everything from the studio network guys, you know, Paramount, CBS, etc. For the same show, we're pitching all the way over to Xbox. You know, I mean, in the middle there's Amazon and there's Hulu and all that other stuff, but then there's Xbox, and then someone said, "Oh, don't forget the Wii people are buying."
Exactly.
And I said, "The what?" So, yeah, they're producing they want content for the Wii, and I was like, wow, they're all, they may be paying next to nothing for it, because of the competition, but we'll eventually figure out how to make these things pay for themselves.
Right,
Just the idea that there's all these different places where your content can go, and it used to be, by the way, it was recently, and I think you'll agree with me there, the multi-platforming, which is we have our product and we're going to sell it on DVD and on pay-per-view, and it's going to end up on your phone, and it's going to end up on your, all these different places. Well, actually now, no, it can just be on your phone. That's it. This content's we've got the rights on your phone. We're just going to deliver it on your phone, and maybe they're going to make that pay somehow. And maybe they'll sell it to somebody else. And I think it's all really cool.
It is really cool. And, pardon me, underneath all of that is this wonderful idea that being a creator, being a maker, being a screenwriter, being, the talent, if anything, just has become even increasingly more valuable.
Right.
We may not have absolutely refined our notions about monetization. We certainly haven't seen the end of proliferating channels. I mean, I think that whole idea, it was very cute. Who was it that said? Who came up with the line about we're entering the 500 channel universe?
Right.
Was that John Malone or someone like that?
I don't recall. I've heard it.
But in any event, I mean, that was it was probably a preposterous idea at the time he uttered it. It has become only more so today, because actually where it's going is more the other way. It's like now eventually we're going to come back to a sensible 18, 20, 25 channel universe where it's not all the flotsam and jetsam. That's already on YouTube. We don't, need
and
it.
And not just that, but as pay-per-view gets so much more refined and quicker and stuff, it's going to be just scroll down, click, I want to watch that. Right. And whether it's something that just was released, 5 minutes ago, or whether, instead of it's Christmas and I want to watch, a Christmas movie or something, with my family or kids, and looking for, come on, it's on every channel, but we can't seem to find it tonight. Oh no, it's the colorized version. We don't want to watch that. You're just going to be able to click, and it's going to be a perfect, pristine copy. And we're almost there as it is, and you'll pay, whether it's $1 or 50 cents or $20 for it, based upon. And not only that, we're going to be able to name our own price. For the content. The idea for years that a movie like, as we joked about, Welcome to Mooseport, let's just say it deserved a certain kind of popularity, whatever, it would play in the same cinema right next to Avatar in 3D, and you're going to charge the same ticket price,
right?
For that, because you're charging the same for the popcorn. Is utterly irrational in the retail world. That is a filmmaker, you can't go in and say, actually no, I would like my product, that I spent only $15 million on instead of $500. I'd like my product to be sold for $5.99, and see if I can get a lot more people to show up, because of that. It doesn't mean it's a crappier product. It just means, I don't need to make that much money on it to be satisfied. And that's going to be interesting, instead of just the studios discounting everything in the same breath or something. So that's, that's somewhere else. I'll watch my kids do that, but it's still going to be fun to watch. I'll be the first one to line up and pay for it.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's one of the things that doesn't often get talked about, which is pricing in the marketplace. Mm-hmm. We've held very dear to that model for probably too long, and that's a complicated conversation between the exhibitor and the big theatrical distributors. But I think inevitably that will go the way of all good things.
I hope that gets blown up really soon. Did I talk to you about my two lesbian friends? This isn't a setup for a joke.
How did we talk? How did we talk for an hour and not get to your two lesbian friends? No, you didn't.
This is just another end of the spectrum. There's a couple of ladies I know in Chicago who, and this is just for the filmmakers and writers out there who are looking for all the different ways to platform your stuff. They are part of an alternate lifestyle website that you pay a subscription fee. And I had sat down and I had dinner with drinks with these ladies not too long ago, and they began telling me about their business, which is, as part of this website, they write, produce, direct, and platform dramatic and comedic content for that one niche alternate lifestyle audience.
Is that Tello Films?
It is. It is. But here's the first example I'd heard of someone in that webisode world who's learned how to make it work and pay. They're making a living writing, directing, and producing their own content. And that, to me, was shattering, you know, and cool.
Doug,
that's just one tiny niche market.
Exactly. It's a microcosm. What's really cool is not only do they get to perpetually write, produce, direct, and create, which is already pretty amazing.
Right.
But what they're also doing, which I think is a much truer statement for your friends than it is for, let's say, ABC today, they're actually building a fan base, a true audience,
right.
A sustainable audience that will follow them from project to project. And I think that's part of the key as we talk to, you said, talking to writers and others about how you begin to rethink and evaluate how you can better platform your wares, what kind of content, what other things can you be doing to begin branding yourself, creating a following, an audience. I mean, I think that's the Tug. Did I tell you about Tug in our last call?
No, you didn't. I've heard it. I've heard of it from
somewhere. So it's another interesting model, and I'm going to probably not do it justice, but in a nutshell, it's tugg.com. So Tug is a platform where we as filmmakers could go there with our product, and we could say we want to schedule at this location in this city on this date or these dates at this hour, at these major exhibition venues. We want to schedule those, and we have a contract with that exhibitor that locks us into that, and we have a drop-dead date by which our job is, I believe it's to sell 75 seats. And if we have marketed 75 seats, we're a go. And you could do that perpetually. But what's also interesting about it is that we're getting to the point where half of their model, if not more than half of their model, is not about empowering filmmakers to do this, but letting people who like that film in their city or their geography become a promoter. There are now this whole diaspora
and such.
Exactly, a whole diaspora of film promoters who might be fans of the filmmaker or who might have just tripped on this one film and love it, or they might be curating films in their city and taking over one shoebox theater at the end of the Cineplex, which has actually started to happen. These people are almost taking dominion over one screen in a Cineplex and curating films, and then they get the following.
Right.
People trust their opinion. So I think we're just at the tip of the iceberg in terms of a lot of new models that we're going to be that are going to make.
The end, you were bringing. You're describing something that's bringing a product back to a movie theater in the oldest way possible. When they would, roll into town, a guy would roll into town with the reels under his arm, because those are the only reels of his movie, and he'd put up the posters and, we're going to run this movie tonight, and the town would come out and see it. I think that's really, really awesome.
Yeah, Cinema Paradiso.
Exactly. It's that whole world. and because that is, you know, because you talk about the different platforms and stuff, and I, you know, we talked about binge viewing. I like opening my computer and, you know, taking that show that I love so much that I've just discovered and going through 5, 6, 7 episodes and stuff. I like my big screen in my house, deciding to watch this movie on that night, whatever. But there's something I don't think we're going to lose, which is this. I think Larry Kasdan once put it, and I think he probably stole it from somebody, but sitting and watching a movie in a movie theater with an audience, you know, is in the dark, is this experience you can't experience anywhere else. You know, I can really enjoy watching a big or great movie in my living room or in my screening room or on my iPad, but that shared collective dream that can happen in a movie house, can still only seem to happen there. And I don't even think we're killing the movie house. I think it's going to be reinvented because people are going to want to go and sit in a movie theater and watch that have that experience with everyone else. You know?
I think we're going to be able to add layers to that movie theater experience. It's interesting, you're right, but that's like that old whoever it was, you know, rumors of my death are premature. The movie house has been pronounced almost dead on a multiple. When we came upon the VHS, the VCR, everyone was terrified. They said that this is the worst thing that could ever have happened. The movie houses are all going to shut down now. Everyone's going to stay home and put this black box in their thing, and that's it. We'll never see movies again.
Yeah, and it's not true. We'll see it. We're going to see it in different ways. How movie houses, you know, and exhibitors expand or grow their business or shrink it to a place that works for them, I don't know. But there's that experience as a film watcher where you remember those transcendent moments. You were in that movie with those strangers. You didn't know those people, but boy, you shared that same experience with them at that same time, and it made it that much more powerful. And as a filmmaker, I don't want to see that go away because there's no experience as a filmmaker like running your show or running your movie for a packed house and having it go over really well. You know, that's an extraordinary feeling.
Yeah, I agree, and I think there's the possibility, the legitimate possibility for some disruption, to use an overused word, of the actual what is a movie theater today. I think we've lived with a movie theater. Well, we went from the standalone to the Cineplex, but ultimately it's the same interior experience. I think that's ripe for some change. But I think that you're right. It's in us. I believe actually the opposite. I think the more of these channels, the freedom to experience content as, when, and where we please, at a price perhaps that we choose. If we have the Amazons and some subscription models, some streaming models, some advertising models, whatever, all these different delivery mechanisms, the more we can enjoy storytelling, the more it becomes part of the fabric of our life, and we will seek it out.
Very much so. I agree with that 100%. Because, you know, at the end of the day, it's still storytelling, and I think if you're watching a big giant movie, you know, on a big screen, that's a compelling story, or if you're sitting around a campfire with someone and that person leans in and starts telling that thing that makes you want to hear what happens next. Yeah, you know, it's universal. It's going to be around.
Bethan, there's some interesting. I'm seeing a lot of people are chiming in here.
Turning off.
Yeah, they're all flooding away, Doug.
They're running away.
Yeah, they're fleeing. I know.
We thought you were talking about breaking into Hollywood, not.
It's breaking out. Yeah.
Dreaming.
Okay, I'm going to print this one up from Susan.
Yeah, Susan has a good one. Can you read that?
if Netflix, Amazon, etc. take over the content of film as well as series-type programming, that sounds like advertising will come back in a big way to pay for that programming. So another market gets a boost.
Agreed.
Good thought?
I think that's absolutely true, and yet, here's the beauty. We have a fragmented world where we have different business models now. We have subscription models, we have advertising models, and then we've got Amazon. None of the above. Amazon works on almost a negative margin. I mean, this brilliant guy, Jeff Bezos, everyone derided him for losing money year after year after year, and look who's controlling the universe now. His whole thing is about customer service and creating an experience. Kind of like what Zappos did in a lesser way.
Right.
Why Amazon bought Zappos, because they have a very similar philosophy about giving the customer, first and foremost, the best possible experience, and the heck with the profit margin. Let's own their loyalty. They're probably the first company in the new landscape, what I call the new Hollywood, which they're part of,
right?
To actually exalt the consumer and give choice to the consumer. Because, Doug, that's really what we're saying. The amount of choice has been sort of pulled back.
They're absolutely, utterly, completely trusting the consumer. And not second-guessing them. They're just trusting them completely.
That's their value system. And I think that in all those different ways, Susan, you're absolutely correct. We're going to see a boost, a boom, a resurgence, as opposed to the contraction that we've had when we left it in the hands of just the major studios and the major networks.
Okay, I'm going to bring up another one from Terry. I think this might be a long answer, so if we could try to do it quick as possible. Please pass on this question to Doug. Terry Herbert. What is the key to writing a draction, the kind of script you can enter in a screenwriting contest under both categories, action and drama?
Okay, Terry, I've never heard of draction before. Not to say it's not utterly ubiquitous in your world or a screenwriting contest world. It's probably a category, but it's not one I can necessarily speak to. I can speak to writing. Here's the key to writing a great action movie, which is, in my opinion, all you got to do is write a suspense movie, and have the suspense break out into action. If you've got great suspense and great characters in a situation, and you don't know how that particular situation is gonna resolve itself, ergo suspense, you've got yourself maybe a draction. I don't know. I hope so.
I think he's coined a term. Can I pop in and ask a question? I can't find my chair. At the beginning of the show, Gary said that you didn't go the traditional route, that you got straight through into the studio door. Could you explain a bit more about that and what your experience was?
I got straight into the studio door. I had the short version of the story is I had an agent and I was young, and he found the right producer with the right deal at Warner Brothers at the time. And he was an old enough studio guy, this producer, and this agent was even older, to where they said they thought they could actually sign me up to a studio deal, an old-fashioned weekly paycheck, give him an office, give him a parking space, put a typewriter in front of him, whip him really hard, and see what comes out of him. And that producer was Robert Shapiro, who was a former president of Warner Brothers, and he bit. And so suddenly I had a little closet over on the Warner's lot, and
who was the agent?
An old MCA guy by the name of Harry Bloom. It was my first agent, who has long since left us. He was from the old MCA days. I mean, that's how old he was.
Right.
And I was his youngest client. I was just like this 22-year-old nobody.
That was back in the Lou Wasserman era.
Exactly. And so anyway, I may have been signed to the last weekly studio deal in the history of, Hollywood. I don't know. I may have been the last guy to get that. I got that weekly check, and I had that desk and that office and that typewriter, And I got ignored just enough to where I got to hang out and learn and see, and it was crazy. I had Richard Donner's office to my left. I had George Roy Hill's office to my right.
Wow.
I had people would come in, and Robert Shapiro was producing, little movies like Empire of the Sun, so he was too busy to deal with me. And so if I had an idea, I could just walk into the studio and talk to the studio about it, and they would say, "Sure, go write that. We're paying you anyway."
Okay.
And so that was how I kind of got. That was how I got my butt to the door.
And by the way, just so no one gets overly romantic about this or nostalgia, as great as it was, it gave way to the first look deals and all that.
Right.
But I would hazard to guess that your office was no bigger than your parking space, and the parking space was a lot sexier.
Initially, there wasn't a parking space.
Oh.
It was an assigned lot. I wasn't cool enough to have a parking space, and my office was a closet.
Literally.
That they converted, and I will tell you that office is still a closet. It has been reverted to a storage closet. I see that every time I'm over at Warner's. I walk by that building, and there was my room. Yep, and I just see supplies on the wall and shelves.
In your bio, Doug, we have read that in 1989 you were the first guy to sell a spec script for $1 million.
Yes, but I had to unfortunately split that with a partner.
That's not too bad still.
Okay.
Well, how did that happen?
That happened with the extraordinarily now. He hadn't written anything at that point. I had this agent named Rick Jaffa. Who you all might know as being part of the team of Jaffa and Silver, who wrote the recent, Dawn and Rise of the Planet of the Apes movies, who then left to become an executive at a place during the writer's strike. And he told me a story that he thought would make a really good movie, and, a few weeks later we were just writing it together. And we wrote this thing together, and then the strike ended, and we put it on the market, and we sold it for this ridiculously big number, and that sort of opened the floodgates. It was really fun to be the first script that sold for $1 million, but after that, it was like all bets are off. There were people selling scripts for $4, $5, $6 million. It was crazy.
And so was that, Doug, in around what, 89?
That was in 1989.
Yeah, because 88 we went on strike.
Right.
89 it went for about 11. It went almost a year, and you
Did
were
it go that long?
It was about 11 months. It was one of the longer ones, and then I didn't realize that you were the guy, because I now need to write you a formal thank you note, because back at that time I was managing writers and sold several in that auction frenzy period.
Oh, yes.
For the $1 million plus, and
no, I didn't who we sold it to?
Mine, yes.
No, who we sold the first $1 million script went to in 1989.
No idea.
Disney, which was at that time people would have never guessed that the cheapest studio in town was going to spend the most money for a script, which was also one of the reasons why it was big news.
Did they make it?
No, they did not. They did not make it. You will laugh. It was a World War II action kind of dramedy, and it was a real ode to Kelly's Heroes and stuff like that. And it was a period piece with tanks, and it was before they were using a lot of CGI. And every time they penned out the budget, it came in at $35 million, $40 million, and the studio was like, we don't know. We're kind of scared to spend that kind of money on the movie. And it's like, well, you bought it for $1 million. Why don't you make the $35, $40 million movie? And they kept balking until they talked themselves out of it. Now, I mean, that $35 and $40 million movie now, that's a low budget studio film. At that time, Disney sort of balked at it, and it never happened. But it's a good story. But my favorite part of that story was I then went on to write a whole bunch of other things, including Die Hard and some other stuff. And the time came around where I actually had a little bit of time to write the one thing I really wanted to write. And I remember I wrote my first spec from after I'd written the $1 million spec. And I put that spec on the market on a Friday afternoon. And on Monday, there was a Variety headline, above the fold that said spec script sales from heyday to Mayday. And then I just sort of had an idea that maybe my spec that I just put out wasn't gonna sell that week, and it didn't. Tells you about market forces.
Yeah, they're whimsical and mercurial and unpredictable. That's for darn sure. Yeah, I sold one to the company. I mean, by the way, a lot of these scripts never did get made. Some did. One of the ones I sold was to, you remember Victor Kaufman and Lou Corman formed Savoy Pictures?
I do.
The guys who who created the first $20 million payday for an actor. But it wasn't on our project.
That wasn't The Cheese Stands Alone, was it?
No.
What was that one? I remember that. I just remember that title. Someone sold it.
I remember that one. No, this was one called. This was actually sort of down the Die Hard white stripe. It was called High Roller.
Oh.
Written by J.F. Lawton, and it was basically Die Hard in a Vegas casino.
As writers, when you get...
I didn't get pitched that one.
Sorry for jumping in here with the question. As writers, when you finish a project, you put a lot of heart and soul into it, you put it out there, you've sold it, but it doesn't get made. How does that make you feel? Are you just happy that you've got the money, or has a bit of your heart broken that it never makes it to the screen?
I think there's some writers out there who can say, "Hey, I got the money," and there's some really great and talented paycheck players out there, and so for some writers, yeah, they got the money. People ask me, what's your favorite movie that you've written, or what, and my whole thing is, it's always the thing that's in front of me. The next thing I'm working on, I care as much about as that last thing I worked on, and as much love and affection and care has gone into raising that baby as, the one that gets the summary execution when it doesn't sell as a spec screenplay or whatever, to the one that turns into a big hit movie. So they all break your heart in some regard. And while you're asking the next question, I'm going to leave you for a second because I didn't know Google Hangouts would eat my battery on my computer, so I have to plug it in. Okay. Unless you want just a power outage. So anyway, I'll be right back.
Okay. So while Doug's not there, I just want to notice that Carol Ann, I love this comment about Stephen Simon, the guy who produced Where Dreams May Come, started Spiritual Cinema Circle. God, that was a bunch of years ago, wasn't it? And she said, use this model to bring films into communities that wanted them. And that's absolutely right. There are more and more and more of these sort of specialized.
You're going to get a tour of my office.
Thank you. Do we pay extra for that?
No, but at least I think there's a plug over here. Find the spare one.
Spiritual cinema was another great example. And there was something else I noticed here. I think we'll ask this one. Bethan, would you do me a favor? There's a message there from a question from Daniel Naylor.
Mm-hmm. You want to bring it up?
Yeah, I've got the wrong glasses on, but can you read that, please?
Sure. Would you say, due to the mass influx of content, that certain shows, movies, etc., get lost as the pool gets bigger? A new Reservoir Dogs type movie, for example, could now miss a cinema release, go video on demand, and go missing.
There's always been that danger, even when, that great movie's going to end up, missing its window or not finding the right platform or not getting the right support from the right studio. Even in the days of Reservoir Dogs, like that film, for example, you can probably think of 2 or 3 films that went straight to video at that time that were pretty awesome and maybe had gotten lost. So there's always that chance. And no matter what time or when or whatever platform or whether the market's expanding or contracting, you got to still hope for the right bit of luck, and you still got to figure out how to get those people to show up that one time, or to download that one time, or to view it at that right time, to create a little bit of that right amount of topspin, and that changes in the market. And so I certainly don't want the market to be smaller just because we're afraid that we're going to miss a Reservoir Dogs. Hopefully that'll get discovered eventually anyway.
Okay, thank you.
I think the other, I agree with that absolutely, and I think a little, I wouldn't make it the centerpiece, but I would suggest that one of the luxuries that we all have today that we really didn't have up until now is the ability to engage with prospective audience, even starting before we've shot a foot of film or a foot of video. We have the chance to start a conversation and include people and have ambassadors and people who sort of get excited about coming behind the scenes and being part of, whether it's text, video, stills, whatever, the experience. A lot of people are deeply fascinated by what you and we do, by the storytelling, filmmaking process. And I think that some of these platforms, there's the old story of Four-Eyed Monsters, a little indie film. Back in the day, they released it as some webisodes, and then they made the film available in its entirety for free on 2 platforms, YouTube and MySpace. In return for which their only request was, and they published their email address, please write us if you like this film, and tell us you would like it, and tell us the name of your town or your city. That was it. And they ended up receiving thousands and thousands of emails, and they printed them out and walked with a couple of boxes, stacks literally, of these requests for screenings into the offices of IFC, Independent, what was that, Independent Film Channel? I forget the channel. And thank you. And a legitimate platform distributor, indie distributor, and put the boxes down and said, there's the audience, here's the film, would you be interested? And they said, absolutely.
Proof of demand. Yeah. Because, again, just because someone is a successful businessman or has a business model that's working for them as a studio or a platform of some kind, doesn't mean they're smart enough to recognize every great idea that comes across their doorstep. And sometimes you got to stick it right in their face and say, look, here's my audience. I've sold this many tickets in advance for you. Whether you're going in with that's one of the reasons the YA books are doing so huge right now. In just because there's that audience, you can go in and show that distributor beforehand, this book has a following of God knows how many young women out there. And here's an example. Fault in Our Stars, my favorite film this year, by the way, for many, many reasons. You wouldn't think that, being a guy who writes Draction, but here's a movie that was made for nothing. And did they know going in that it was going to open to $100 million or something insane beforehand? I think they had to some degree, because if they knew, my daughter and all her friends, they were all keyed up and teed up to see it, and there's that's an example of the market being there beforehand and them wise enough, to just make the movie for just the right amount of money. But I'm going all over the place with it, but I think that's another exciting way to prove your concept before you make the movie.
But
prove your market.
Yeah, and I think that dovetails, Doug, with the question you answered just minutes ago about, what if, what's the possibility that a film will slip through the marketplace slats, like the Reservoir Dogs that doesn't get distribution, and that kind of thinking, that sort of, I think traditionally there's, especially in the indie market, there's a lot of history where people said, if only I could just get it made, then we'll figure it out. And today, you really have to say sort of the opposite, which is, if I get just the right talent, doesn't mean big price, 20 million, 5 million, 10 million, 2 million even. As soon as if I get the right talent with the right story, and I seed that a little bit, there's a lot that you can do, because I agree. Doug said something that I haven't heard anyone say, but it's 100% true. In fact, years ago, I was developing a film at MGM when Alan Ladd was running the studio, and I was working with his brother David as my executive. And I remember Alan saying a great line, which was, if I had green-lit every film that I had passed on, and if I had passed on every film that I had green-lit, my batting average would be more or less the same. This was a man, maybe the only captain of industry, the only studio head in Hollywood, so down to earth that he could actually utter such a line, because he didn't have that kind of ego. He could admit
it.
It's the I don't happen to agree that nobody knows anything, as William Goldman would say, but I think that to a great extent it is true. None of us know. People always say, when you have a big hit, did you know it was going to be a big hit? Well, back in the day, absolutely not, because the most that we could do when the film was almost locked, not quite, we could go out in the outlying area around the outskirts of Los Angeles and do a test screening and get feedback into a focus group. That was about as, other than that, our hands were tied.
It was all about getting people to the theater in the first place to see it, to where you could start the word of mouth. You knew they liked it. If you got them in the theater, they'd you'd be good. But who knows if they're going to show up that night?
Yeah, and you don't know what else is coming out that night, and there is no Twitter, and it's literally word of mouth. So I think we have a lot of we had there was an advantage back then, and there were certain real disadvantages. I think it nets out. It's just a very interesting time.
It does, and it's just gonna be different. That's all. It's not, and it's always been that way. It's always been different. It's always changed. It had long periods where it was sort of a system that worked, but still it was still changing, and it's going to continue to change, and embrace it and have fun with it, and or retire.
And I think it all comes down to the same thing. Whatever number of dollars you have, the important thing is not that, it's go out and tell a great story.
Right. Always. I always just say, because people ask, writing books and movies, the most consistent question I get is, what's the difference between writing a book and writing a movie? And yes, there's lots of differences, but when I sit down to do it, it's the same thing. It's the same screen, it's the same keyboard, and my credo is the same thing. I want whoever's reading it to want to turn the page. Whether it's a movie, a book, a short film, or this incredibly weird feedback I'm getting.
That must be the plane flying over the beach.
Is that what that is?
Yeah, I think it's a plane.
It's weird. It was sort of going in and out. It was sort of cool.
Yeah,
but
like
still,
a big bumblebee.
Right. Anyway, it's the same thing. You wanna be compelling, and you want to not only do you want to be compelling, but you're still a fan, and you still want to go when you click on something or turn it on or pay your $10 or 15 or 20 whatever to see it. You want to be compelled. We all want to be compelled, to watch, to hear that really great story, and that hasn't changed since they first, learned how to make fire.
Yeah. So, Doug, speaking of books and stories, and you have this book. I'm not
Oh,
doing
that's
this.
Blood Money. Nice. That's
So,
not a
Blood
cover.
Money, which is
The
available.
actual cover is much sexier.
Yeah, I've got a black and white printout, so that's not doing very good. But Blood Money, which is your fairly recent work of
My
yours.
most recent novel, which you can get on my website.
So DougRichardson.com.
DougRichardson.com, and you can get that for essentially what you would pay for a grande latte, maybe less actually.
No, good sales pitch. I like that.
There you go.
I'm gonna remember that. So
Just-
DougRichardson.com. Skip one coffee tomorrow, you can have a great book.
Exactly.
And what's you said you have, what other book is on your site for sale?
I have all four of my books on my site are for sale.
Okay.
All four novels are available as ebooks and for print. The previous one being The Safety Expert. Those are the two I would. Those are the most recent ones. Those are sort of my LA noir books that I've begun a series of, and I will finish my next one soon as television pitching season is over. And so those are there to get, and again, read for a very reasonable price instead of, something, instead of a ticket to Avatar.
Latte, I love that. Gary, we got to wrap this up after 6.
Yeah. I think there's more questions, but I think we've just simply, and apologies to all of you who joined us live, who've been very activist in asking all these wonderful questions, but I think we're going to have to liberate Mr. Richardson. It is 6:02 in the eve. So
they can always contact me. They can send a note via my website if they have a question. I answer pretty much all my mail if it's decent and not too overwhelming, and or through Twitter, which I'm by Doug Rich BYDougRich.
I put your Facebook and Twitter addresses in the comments here, so everybody can follow you.
Awesome. They can go there. They can ask me, and I keep a constant dialogue with a lot of people all the time. So this can continue on, just not tonight. In my office.
And then there's the third thing is the contact form on your website, DougRichardson.com.
Yes, sir.
So, Doug, a great pleasure. Thank you for your generosity of your time and thoughts and all that.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Bethan, any closing thoughts or things we need to address?
Lovely to meet you, and thank you for being so generous, inviting the audience to contact you. Your Facebook address, the books you can get on the website.
Oh, yes, and the blog. Twitter. Sorry, the weekly blog. The blog. There's a blog that I publish pretty much weekly. That is just one Hollywood trench tale after the next, and there'll be a forthcoming book. So go sign up for the blog, get an email update, and you'll get the blog every week.
Well, thank you ever so much for your time, and hope to have you back.
All right. Thank you.
Doug, you're the best. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Gary. Thanks, Bethan.
Good night,
You guys have a nice day.
You as well.
All right.
Thanks all. Thanks for joining us.
Bye.